Hello, and welcome to the We Are Power podcast. If this is your first time here, the We Are Power podcast is the podcast for you, your career, and your life. We release an episode every single Monday with listeners in over 60 countries worldwide, where you'll hear personal life stories, top-notch industry advice, and key leadership insight from amazing role models. As We Are Power is the umbrella brand to Northern Empowerment Awards, which celebrates hundreds of female role models and advocates every year. This is where you can hear stories from all of our awards alumni and stay up to date with everything MPW Awards and We Are Power. Well, hello and welcome to the podcast. Today I am joined by the incredible, wonderful, look at him, look at that smile, Paul Kallee-Grover MBE. Does that ever get old?
No. Does it get old for you?
No. It's a while now.
It is. And I think every time there's a new batch come out, I get so excited.
Well, for every year, I literally, to the annoyance of my husband, Rob, because they get announced at like 10 o'clock at night. And so when we just had the recent batch of New Year's, I go through them. There's 158 pages on a PDF. And I always go through, because I think it's quite overwhelming, isn't it?
Yes.
My husband always says it was, what was it? My bloody effort is what it stands for. And I'm like, is it, Rob? But what did it feel like when you got that envelope through? And what did you get it for?
I got it for international trade. So it was that odd year. It was 2021. So we were kind of in COVID, not quite in COVID. I'd left a company, started in a new business. So it all just felt very strange because, as I said, I've been doing international trade for, at that point, a decade. And I'd been working with the government as an export champion. But because I think we were in a sort of a COVID-ish world, I hadn't really seen anybody. So to then get something in the post from an organisation you've been working with for quite a while was to think, well, I've seen you all on Teams and I've done Zoom calls with you all, but I've not, at that point in time, I wasn't doing any international trade. And I didn't realise these things take 2 to 3 years to go through the process. And a lot of times, and I say this to people, you might get knocked back 1 or 2 times. I had no idea. I don't know if you had any idea. No idea at all. So I think sometimes for people, it's patience. Yeah. Your time will come. And to just be recognised is great.
It's wonderful. It is wonderful. And so let's talk about you. We talked about international trade. You have your own business, Key Partnership, which you set up in 2021.
2021,
But where did your adventure, you've worked for Arup previously as well. Where did your whole kind of career adventure, how did you get to this point that you get the lovely, well, it's not a very lovely envelope. It's a brown envelope that looks like a tax statement that you get your MBE for, services to international trade. But where did your adventure take you? Where did that start to get you in?
I think you go back to sort of my early teens, really. So I was really fortunate. I had someone who guided me, both in terms of GCSEs, A-levels, degree, actually gave me my first job. So, from the age of sort of 12, somebody had been guiding is the word I'm going to use. I wanted to work in sort of regeneration and cities, and I love geography. And it's like, well, there's certain things you can do and certain things you can't. I'm not great at maths. So civil engineering was out the door. And it was like, well, why don't you think about planning and law and those sorts of things? So that's kind of the path I went on. And I worked for a number of international real estate companies in the UK. But then as I got more advanced, the opportunities then came to go to their other offices. That's the exciting bit.
And how would you, with all these adventures you've had, how would you describe Paul Kallee-Grover in a couple of sentences? Is that even possible?
It is possible, yeah. It's like the elevator pitch, isn't it? I'm a connector. I connect people. I connect people to ideas to people to projects to places. So yeah, I connect things.
You're a matchmaker.
Yeah, kind of a matchmaker. Is
this what led you to setting up Key?
Yeah, I think I'd worked for corporates, and there's nothing wrong with corporates. Corporates are great, but I kind of had my time. And you get to a point in your career where you spend more time managing people and not managing the projects. And it's the projects I get excited by. That's where my knowledge came in. So I'd as I said, I'd had a career working for a lot of multinationals. And then in that COVID period, I went to actually work for a family office. Never done that before. So working for sort of a mom and pop team type thing, and you're there with the owner of the business, really in the business. I was like, I love this. This is really exciting. And an opportunity came up, and he, the CEO of that business actually gave me money to help me set up, and said, "Here you go. Here's 3 months. This will see you through. Give it a go. See what happens." And that I'm so grateful to Chris and his team for giving me that start, really.
But that ultimately, the world is about relationships, isn't it?
It is about relationships.
Money makes the world go round, but if we don't have those relationships and that network community, then nothing's possible, right?
Nothing's possible. And, as I said, it's with his blessing. So there were certain clients that came with me and other clients where we had that conversation and said, well, they're your client. So we were working with family offices. So it is all about relationships. It's all about families working, creating opportunities. So I was very fortunate when I set up. I had a couple of those clients plus others I'd worked with for years, who helped me. So that initial 3 months that I'd been given, I didn't really need it, luckily. But I think for starting up on your own, it's, you've got mortgages to pay and bills to pay. And it's kind of like very, very nervous, anxious time. Like, am I doing the right thing?
And where did you talked about before that sort of you had someone helping you make those decisions when your A-levels, your degree, gave you your first job, mentorship, I suppose,
definitely,
if you like.
Mentorship.
Where did you go to for that advice? You had support from the family office, but where did you go to when you were thinking, you've set up key and you're like, am I actually doing the right thing? Do I actually know how to make this work as my own
I've got an
business?
amazing network of people in Liverpool that I work with. Lots of important, powerful women in the city. And I reached out to all of them and just said, can we sit down? Can we have a conversation? What things, I'd never done accounts before. All these kind of things. It's like, where do I go? Who do you use?
Yeah.
Who could you recommend? And there was sort of a lot of learning. I think we always say that when you start up in business, a lot of learning. But I'm 3 years in, so I've always been conscious, most businesses fail in 12 months. When you've got 18 months and then 3 years, which, I'm just enjoying it. So we'll see where we go, right?
And what advice would you give to anyone out there who's, having their own adventure in their career and maybe thinking they want to be brave and do something bold or whatever? What advice would you give them apart from find a good accountant?
Yeah, find good accountants, step out and do it. And I think speak to a number of people, speak to people who've done it. And people who've done it will tell you the pitfalls. They'll tell you what you've done wrong. So, I can say this now. One of the things I did very early on, I launched my business. I was very, this is my company, key partnerships. This is what my brand is, all this sort of stuff. And then I got served with a notice to not use the logo, not use the name. And that cost me a lot of money to resolve very early on. Had I have gone through things in the right process, it wouldn't have been a challenge. So I say to people now, like, just make sure you've done this. Speak to someone around this. There are so many voices that can help you and places you can go.
And people want to help, right?
They really do. They really do. And what they really want to do is go, this went awfully wrong for me. Try not to do this.
Yeah, no, we don't want that, do
Nobody
we? We don't
wants
want
that.
How can we help people avoid making those mistakes? And where are we now? 11 years you've been serving as
export champion.
An export champion.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I feel like there's a superhero cape coming into play. But what is that? How did that come about?
So
what does it look like?
At that point, I'd been working on my own business, or the company I was working for at that time. And we were working in lots of different international markets. And we had an opportunity to enter into China. So this was actually 2010, long time ago now. And Liverpool as a city was the only UK city represented at the World Expo. So the government at the time came to my company and said, would your business be interested in going out to Shanghai and finding an opportunity? And that's how it kind of started the conversation. And we did. We went out there, we set up an office, we did all sorts of things off the back of that. And then I moved over to Arup, which you mentioned. And with Arup, again, there was lots of opportunities in different markets. So an export champion, they first came out in 2013. So this was a Northwest concept under a chap called Clive Drinkwater and his team at the, it was UKTI then.
Yeah.
It's now Department of Business and Trade. And they wanted this sort of network built around them of people who had done it. So that if you were a startup business, you could go, what do I do in this market? What do I need to be aware of? What cultural training? What do I need? What licensing do I need? And who better than businesses? Yeah. So that was the initial piece. And there's still 5 of us who've been there from the very beginning. But it's sort of 600 odd now, I believe, across the country. It's sort of been rolled out. And every year they decide, are new people going to come in? Are people going to move on? And I've been very fortunate. I've been asked to stay each year. And I always say this, I was the first one to sort of walk the floor. So most people, it's attached to the business. And then when they leave the business, it's gone. Whereas I've moved several businesses and kept the title. So it's more about me and what I can do with the business than it is around, just leaving it with the business sort of thing. So yeah, that was great. And we talked about the MBE piece. So back in 2018, I was one of, I think there was 4 of us originally who won this sort of Border Trade Award, a BOFTA they were called. Yeah, brilliant. It's as near as I'm going to get. Board of Trade Award.
Know.
And that was giving us sort of recognition for what we were doing to support the UK PLC overseas. And really, I've just sort of built on that. And for me now, having both the export champion, that board of trade, the MBE, when I look at new markets, I speak to an ambassador, I speak to the team on the ground, and it's kind of like an endorsement that I know what I'm doing, but also I'm bringing all these businesses behind me. Can you help? That's what it's for, really.
And that giving back, helping, paying it forward is something that strikes me as that's integral in your DNA.
Yeah.
You want to help. You're happy to ask for help, but you have roles at the Liverpool City region, Wirral Chamber. You've got really key advisory roles within these organisations.
I do that, but I also do sort of private mentoring as well. So I really love just working with businesses, which is what I love, seeing them explore new markets, sell products. I've got a few people through your organisation that I've mentored, and then I've got some people I mentor in North America. And this is just really about helping them find out about them. So talking, listening, that sort of stuff.
And it wasn't so long ago that we had a conversation, and I don't know if it was during the judging, because you've been one of our judges for a good few years now, and you always love coming in for the discussion. And this year, we were all in person, weren't we? So it was amazing. But you talked about people reaching out to you on LinkedIn for mentoring.
Yes. I had a couple just before Christmas, actually. Yeah. And I think if you look at my LinkedIn, it's always a balance. There is a lot of work on there. There's a lot of personal stuff. And I try and sort of talk to people about, what is the purpose of social media posts, really? And it's to give a sort of a more rounder version of yourself. You can be just talking about work, or you can just be talking about yourself. So I try and have a balance. And I think that balance lets people know more about who I am, so they can then reach out to me and go, I didn't know you did that. Can we have a chat?
Well, you have so many strings to your bow. A master's from MIT in Boston.
Yeah.
How on earth did that come about?
Yeah, that's really odd. Well, it's not odd. It's strange. So I've never been academically gifted, right? I was diagnosed when I was 18 with ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia. We've now got dysgraphia as well. So,
wow.
All these things are seen as negatives. I no longer see them as negatives, which is really good. They've all got sort of disorder. I ignore the disorder bit and just think that they give me the ability to do things. So that would never have been on my cards when I was sort of 17 or 18. I went to a good university. I went to Cardiff, studied planning and law, and I did well. I worked full time, so I didn't get a first. I did okay, and then when I was working for one of these multinational companies, they said, "Look, we've got a partnership with MIT, and we're looking to put some of our staff with opportunities through. Would you consider it?" And I was like, Would I consider getting a qualification through MIT? Yes, I would. And I've had strong links with Boston for a number of years, and to actually go and study there and, use all these things. And I go a lot, I'm regularly in America now. And when I take over businesses from the UK, I go straight into the MIT. It's like, I'm an alumni. Let me in here. Let me see the chief or this department head. And that has been really useful. Again, I had an opportunity, so I really want to showcase now. And MIT, as you know, is sort of leading in a lot of these fields. I was doing urban resilience. And urban resilience.
What even is that?
What even is that? So it's really just the impact on external factors it can be on business, it can be on climate, it can be all sorts of things. And it's how you cope with that. So it's when you put something under stress, whether it's a city, whether it's a rail system, a road system, your business. And I remember when we were doing scenarios, so I studied this in 1819, and one of the scenarios we wanted to do is about a pandemic. And they were like, oh, well, that's never going to happen. Let's not do that. Let's focus on climate change or something. So, a couple of years later, then to see the pandemic was really interesting because it was kind of how do businesses work. And when you did that course, it wasn't just you on your own, obviously. There was people from pharmaceutical companies. There was people from foundations. So actually, again, it was that network. That was the exciting bit.
And we've talked about Key, the business.
Yep.
We've talked about your roles, your advisory roles and board roles. You've got a new role at the Playhouse and Everyman Theatre.
Yeah, trustee.
Trustee there, indeed. That's amazing. That's literally just been announced, I think, just before Christmas. Sometimes, and you took the opportunity to go in and do the Masters in Boston, but sometimes it can be overwhelming and you can't fit it all in. How have you managed to make that jigsaw piece, all those pieces fit? Because there's other pieces in there. Because you're Paul, the human, the paddleboarder, the surfer, the voiceover artist.
Yeah, I do voiceover stuff in America, as you do. 2 soap operas, actually, two online podcast soap operas, I think, if you want to call them. Yeah, we can do a whole other episode on that.
But, and equally, let's not even forget the fact that you used to play keyboards in a 90s band.
I still do play keyboards in a 90s band, yeah. Or I should say, I stand behind a keyboard
and
in
look
a
great.
90s band.
And just look amazing, right?
Yeah.
But how do you make all those pieces fit?
You just make them fit.
And walk the dog.
My philosophy has always been, say yes and then work it out. So I think for me, often people ask me, do you want to do this or do you want to? And I'll say yes.
Hell yes.
Before I've thought about what it actually means. And for the most part, you can do it, I think one of my biggest challenges, this was a couple of years ago now, I got asked to do one of those charity Strictly things.
Have that on my notes right here.
Yeah, let's just say.
Weren't you in pink?
I was in pink. Well, we were Barbie,
you
right?
Were Barbie.
I wasn't Barbie. I was Ken, but So yeah, it was very interesting. But I didn't realise how much work goes into that. You can't just rock up and do that.
Because you have a pretty professional dancer, don't
you?
Have 10 weeks
to work with, and the pressures about letting them down, but it's also you're raising money for charity. Yeah. You've got friends, family, whatever else in the room, and early on I was like, oh well, it's just a laugh. Everyone's going to give you a lot of stuff. No, they're not. They want BBC quality dance.
And so do you, right?
Yeah. I did, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've won a BAFTA. This is a step to a BAFTA, right?
Yeah, that's the way to get there. I would say it was, I like pushing myself up my comfort zone. That was probably as far as I've gone. Out my comfort zone, because even when I'm doing the keyboard stuff, there's a keyboard in front of me,
like a barrier, isn't it?
And I'm not singing. There's a singer doing all that sort of stuff. I'm background.
What dance
I'm good
did
at background.
you do?
We did the samba to "Dance the Night Away," which was the Barbie main song. There was a lift. There was all sorts of stuff. There was a lot of glitter and diamantes. That was just me. I had Diamante Cuban heels. They were amazing.
Still got them?
Still got them. Yeah, I don't know when I'm going to wear them again. But
On a surfboard.
Can you imagine?
Well, Rob did it. Rob did Northern Power Man. My husband did Strictly many years ago for Roy Castle, and he did Argentinian tango to Seven Nation Army is what he did, and he was full on spandex. Yeah. It's one for the team. There, they've just learned that about Rob. But just going back to the question, actually, how do you make all that work for you? Because before we started rolling today, we talked about, you spend a lot of time in Newquay. That's a happy place for you. Yeah. But then how are you going to be able to get to here, or I need to get to China, or I need to get to Boston, but you're making that work for you, your downtime.
Yeah, I'm always working. So my downtime and my work time. So I'd say, I wouldn't promote this for everybody, but 7 days, I do stuff over 7 days. I'm not working full time any one of those days. I get things done. I get things fitted. And I think that's where I said, growing up, having or being diagnosed with ADHD, you're told you can't do this, you can't do this. These are all challenges. Whereas I've learned through like the ADHD Foundation, which is here in Liverpool, that if you channel that, you use that in the right way, it works for me. So I've got multiple plates spinning at any one time. The challenge is to make sure none of those plates drop.
Yeah. Maybe get some plastic ones.
That's what I was going to say, plastic plates. But that actually works for me. So I work better in an environment where I've got lots of things on at once. I think the worst thing for me is like a blank in the diary. I'm like, well, what was that meant to be? I'd rather have 3 or 4 things. So straight after this, I'm going to go and see a new business. I've got another business to see later on. In between, I'll probably fit in a gym session. So it's one of these where, I was thinking, because I knew I was coming into you, and I'd just been out surfing a few days ago. There's this moment when I'm just looking at the horizon, looking for that perfect wave to come in. And you have to read everything, the weather conditions, the water conditions, who's around you, what's going on, and then watching the waves to work out that you've got to flip, turn, do all your bits and pieces to get the perfect wave to ride in. Most of the time, you're not going to get it. It's not going to be the right wave. But when you do get it, that elation, that sort of endorphin rush, and I'd say that's what I do with my work. I constantly look at the horizon. What's coming? How can I prepare for that? What can I do? Who can I bring with me? All these sorts of things. So, for me, that sort of works really well. And again, when I'm doing certain sports, and you'll see these are all high focus, high adrenaline, because of my conditions. I can't do something that goes over a long period of time. I'll get bored. Whereas if I do something that's short and bursts, it works. It works perfectly for me.
You do you, right?
That's what, works for me.
And you talked earlier about my whole ethos is say yes and work it out later. Yeah. And it will come off. Is there a real motivational quotation out there that you live by?
Just say yes. It would be just say yes. Like, I'm doing a 3 Peaks challenge later this year because I said yes just before Christmas. Someone was having a foot operation, said, "Oh, I'd really like to be able to climb a mountain." I was like, "Well, why don't we do 3?" It's that kind of thing. So
go big or go home, right?
Right. So we'll see how that works out.
And one of the things that has come through this whole conversation, you talked earlier on about when you were setting Key up, I'm going to sit down with you specifically went to sort of key women in the city and in your network to sit down and communicate with and, listen to and ask for advice. You are, a real unsung advocate. And I think you're very happy to give and offer opportunities and support. But do you identify as a really strong advocate for gender equality?
Yeah, I think so. But I don't see it. I just kind of reach out to people. And I think, it's looking for people who may be marginalised for whatever reason, sort of to stick together. And it's just sort of, if somebody can do something, I'll ask them. Yeah. It just so happens that I know certain women who've been very successful in their businesses, created their own businesses or creating businesses. And I think for me, I just need to reach out to people who have done that. And that works for me.
And other than 3 Peaks Challenge?
Yep.
Is there any more dancing?
There's no more dancing.
Any more keyboarding?
Yeah, there is actually. I've got 3 or 4 gigs over the summer. Some pretty big ones actually, which I'm quite looking forward to. Big festivals and stuff. So that should be exciting. I'm off to Moldova in a couple of weeks' time. I don't know if you saw on my socials, we sort of facilitated a new air route to Moldova. So I'm working with the diaspora at the moment, that community, on trade links. So I'm going out there as sort of a pre-trade to go and speak to ministers and British ambassador or whatever. And then later in the year, we'll take a delegation out to go and see what are the business opportunities. So again, they're most people don't know much about Moldova, but it's on the border with the Ukraine and borders Romania. They're on a fast track ascension into the EU. So there's lots of opportunities for businesses. And so, yeah, it's an exciting market.
And do you think that ability to spot is one of your superpowers?
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Yeah,
or do you have a crystal ball?
No, I always think I'm a firm believer that you can make business with anyone. You can connect with anybody. Let's get stuck in a lift and see what happens. And you asked me earlier, what does my business do? And again, this sort of elevator pitch, I actually went to an event, sounds more glamorous than it was. It's in New York, so, it's quite glamorous. And it was an elevator networking event. I was like, oh, what's this all about? And you get there and there's this huge queue of people and they put you in a group of 4 into a lift that takes 2 minutes to get to the top floor. He said, you've got 2 minutes, 30 seconds each, to find out about each other's businesses. And when the doors open to the room of people up there, you've got to introduce each other. So you've got to work out as those doors shut, am I just going to talk about myself for a minute and therefore someone else is going to miss out? Or am I just going to listen, which I don't do very well, and absorb that information? Oh, it was horrible. I hated it. But it works really well. And I learned so much just from that and a few other networking events. Like, don't have your name on you. Don't have your name because, my name's quite long and you've got all the letters and stuff. Somebody there had one of the Sesame Street characters, like Elmo or something. So I remember him now. And that wasn't their name, but it was their sort of ability for you to stand out in the crowd.
So how did you go? I want to go back that 2 minute. There must have been a lot of lifts, right?
No. There was a speed lift, and then there was the slow lift that went up. You had to turn the key in it.
So 4 of you.
4 of you, 30 seconds each intro for each other. You never met them before in your life, and you're in a lift.
And how did the person intro you?
Really badly, because one of the other people had chatted for a good, 40 seconds, 50 seconds on the way up. And when you've got to focus, which is hard for me, being able to have that sort of control. And I then went on another mission where we went over to North America. It was an LGBT business leaders mission. So all the businesses were either led by LGBT people or had involvement in LGBT. And on our first day, it was like, what is your business? And I'd sit there for like 10 minutes, my business is blah, 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 blah. And every day it'd have to get shorter and shorter and shorter. So the elevator pitch is, what does key partnerships do? And we add value to business. That's it. We can then expand on what that means and what we do and all these sorts of things. But so often I say to people, what do you do? What is your business? And they just kind of, it's like all the words come out of you and you've got to try and work out.
You're talking about me, aren't you?
Never do that. But it's that kind of, at its core, what are you? And that's very important in North America when you're doing business out there. They want to kind of get down to the core of you. And then this is where the thick skin comes in. If they're not interested, they're gone. They are literally moved on from you. Disposable. But you've got to play a game. I like to call it sort of like, guess who or snap. So let's just say I met you and we're talking and you decide you're going to go off. And when I meet a woman who's looking to become an entrepreneur, I'd have to remember where you were in the room to find her to bring you back together. So it's that connector piece. Yeah. And that's really valuable. If they see value in you connecting people, even though your business might not connect, they see value in you, then the next time they want somebody or have, a need for something, they'll come back and say, oh, do you know somebody? Or could you help me with this? And that's really worked for me.
And that connecting, that's your superpower.
It's connecting, yeah.
It's your superpower.
Yeah, guess who? Snap.
What's the superpower we don't know about you?
I don't know about my superpower.
Tell me you could do a handstand or a headstand on your paddleboard.
I wish I could. No, I think my whole sort of professional career is about predicting what's going to happen, and trying to avoid certain things. So I've always been quite good at that. I've always been sort of very good at that sort of visualization piece. So yeah, that would be, it's not really a superpower, is it?
Of course it's a superpower, although I do think you could be working up to that headstand on and your happy place is Newquay.
My happy place is in water. So it can be anywhere. I'm absolutely fine. Cold, warm would be nice.
You do open water swimming as well.
I do open water swimming quite a lot, yeah. So I'm happiest near water. But I'm from Brighton originally, right? So this is always funny. I have to know where the water is when I sleep. You know, it's one of those kind of things. I need to know where the edge is.
And interestingly, I remember during at whatever point it was in the lockdown, you went past our boat.
I did, yeah.
On a paddleboard. And it was brilliant. You were like, oh my God, we're not speaking to humans in forever. And
socially distanced paddleboard meeting, wasn't it?
It was amazing.
I did a few of those board meetings, as we called them, when we weren't allowed to do anything. And then we went on to sort of running meetings. There was a whole sort of piece where it's just really just, you know, trying to do something a little bit more interesting, more fun, really.
And what are you most excited about this year?
Oh, this year.
This month, should we say? With the amount of stuff you...
Yeah. In a couple of weeks, we've got the Chinese New Year celebration, and I do the Chinese Dragon.
Of course you do.
Yeah, that's we just started training. That's really exciting, and we do that in Chester, and then we do it in Liverpool on the first weekend of February, so 1st and 2nd, because that's where Chinese New Year falls this year. I said I'd be in Moldova before that, and then I'm going to be out in France for MIPIN, which is the big property event in Cannes, supporting some of my clients in Liverpool and also finding some new clients, hopefully.
Amazing, amazing. Paul Kallee-Grover, you're a legend. I love everything that you do. It's about giving back, you're paying it forward, you make time and space for others. And thank you so much for being a massive advocate and supporter for everything that we do at We Are Power. Thank you.
Thank you, Simone. Thank you.
Subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review or follow us on socials. We Are Power_net on Insta, TikTok and Twitter. Or We Are Power on LinkedIn, Facebook, and We Are _Power on YouTube.